Hey guys, welcome back. So far we have been a bit clumsy in terms of dealing our configuration items. So for example, things like base URL, which should change depending on the environment. So let's say if your team is following Git flow, you might have a different base URL for develop staging environments. And of course, if your developers are trying to run the same test on localhost, this URL could be something like localhost 8080. And then we also have things like endpoints, like booking endpoint, you know, for example, auth endpoint, and all this information should actually be a part of configuration files, and it should not be duplicated across, like it is done here. So the same booking endpoint is now used in multiple places, and it's like in future, if let's say developers want to change this, they have to change it in multiple places. So before we start adding these things into configuration file, let's see where should we add what. So to do a quick recap, choices.conf file is the place where you define which environment you want to run your test on. So let's say if you want to run your test on localhost, developer staging, you can specify the choice from here. Application config contains all your common application configuration, and this is now taken from project 0. This was explained in detail in project 0. So if you want to know more about it, you can check that particular video. Maybe I'll put the link to that video in the description below. And for any thing which is specific for environments, we should be adding it under environment specific folders, right? So let's say in our case, if you look into base specification, a base URL is something which is very specific to the environment, right? So then we know that we should not be adding it in application config. We should be adding it in the staging localhost or develop environment config. So you can add it inside secrets if you want. You can add it inside test data. You can add it inside user info. Any place where you feel it is most appropriate to put. Let's put it inside secrets. So if I call it as base underscore URL. So the syntax that we follow is a snake case, everything capital, and this is where you specify your base URL, right? So let's copy the same thing, and let's imagine that for localhost, this value was maybe localhost 8080. It will not work, but we are just trying to show here as a demo. And if we put it as a develop, we can do the same thing here, and maybe we can say it as develop RESTful looker herokuapp.com. So with this, we have the base URL now in place. Choices already contains its staging. In staging, we have given it exactly as it is. So let's just go ahead and try to use this value in the base spec, and let's see if it works or not. So for this to work, what you first need to do is you would need a config element, and you can say test config, and then you can say get instance, get config, and as you can see, for example, this config is implemented in a singleton pattern in test config class. So we have a singleton instance of this particular object, and because of that, you can actually make it final. So if you say private static final, and then of course because it's final, we'll put it as all caps, and then you can actually mention it as config dot, and then if you give get string, and if you specify the base URL, it should be now able to get this value from the configuration file and not from not be hard coded. So just to see if it is working fine or not, let's go to our booking test and let's run the new booking test. So let's run this and see how it goes. Okay, as we can see, it properly fetched the URL. If we go, for example, to this new booking was taking the specification from this get method, and the get method, we can see this configuration is fetched from the configuration, right? and this is exactly what we want. So it is working fine. Apart from basic configuration, the other things that are part of configuration is, for example, things like API endpoints, right? So for example, today this API endpoint is called auth, but tomorrow it could be called something different. And we don't want any endpoint information to be a part of our code, right? And in fact, let's also change this base URI here. So let me copy this and let's auth API, and we're going to get configuration, and let's call it as control V, get string, and basically we want to get the base URL. So this is how we get the base URL. And now we also want to move away this endpoint information. Now the question could be, okay, where should I move this configuration information? Should it be a part of environment specific config, or should it be a part of common config? Now as you can see, the endpoints do not change as per environment. It's only the base URLs that changes, right? So a good candidate for putting endpoint information is inside application config. And as you can see, I've also provided a comment here that says endpoints can come here, endpoints start with a /, ends without a /. And on the other hand, when you give URLs do not end with a /. So that's the main distinction that you have to remember. So in fact, let's reuse what we have here. So I will remove this and I will call it as auth. And a good practice that you can follow is name these endpoints exactly as it is specified here. So I will call it as auth endpoint, all in snake case, right? Let's also change the same for booking API, but before that maybe we can now, instead of saying auth, we can actually say config get string. This is what we want to fetch now, right? So config get string base URL, config get string auth endpoint. And now it does not contain any hard-coded information. And depending on whatever environment is being picked, it will pick the right base URL and it will pick the auth endpoint. Let's go to booking API. Maybe we can also copy this booking API. Let's change this and I'll put this as let's copy paste auth API. Let's copy the whole thing, booking API. Let's put this here. What else? The endpoint name, right? So the endpoint name is booking. So let's go to application config. Let's do a control D. Let's put booking here and let's call it as booking endpoint. Right, let's copy this and let's go back to booking API, and this would be booking API endpoint, right? And let me copy the whole thing and control R, in fact, put this here and control C. So what we're going to do is we are going to replace the string with config get string booking endpoint, right? So let's go down, replace, let's go down and replace. So let's try to run this and let's see if it still works fine or not. So we can again go back to booking test and run this. Everything went well. It has the right URL. It also has the right endpoint, and with the right endpoint it was able to make that call, right? And in fact I can show you even more something even more cool. So in the past, when we have to basically give this booking ID information, we have to do it like config get string booking endpoint plus booking ID. But actually you can provide this as a part of configuration, and the way you can do it is, let's say if you want to pass a variable into your endpoint, the way you can do it is, if I say booking, let me call it as booking ID endpoint. And the way it will work is it will take booking endpoint, and then it will actually you can say uh, you can say uh, booking ID, right? So with this, it should be able to now fetch the booking ID. So if I take booking ID endpoint, and if I go back to booking test, let's see where are we passing booking ID. So I think in the put call, we were actually passing the booking ID, right? So if you go to update booking, instead of doing it like this, actually what I can do now is I can say booking ID endpoint, and instead of plus, I can give it as a comma, right? So I'm saying whatever thing that we get here, comma, give booking ID and substitute it. Let's run the test and let's see if it still works fine or not. Cool. So I think it still worked fine. For not found. Uh, it was not able to find the booking ID. Why? Token was there, endpoint was there, put. Okay, so I think what happened was, if I look into the application config, I have got a / here, and then it added 2 / here, right? So I should not have ended with this. And if I keep it like this, then it should be proper. So if I run the test again, okay, if we scroll down, this time everything was okay. HTTP 200 okay. It was able to update the booking. So basically, we saw two kind of substitutions. One substitution, we already have an endpoint. We don't want to duplicate it, so we are reusing it as like a variable. So then you specify dollar brackets, and then you give the name of the endpoint, and then you have another substitution, which is a variable substitution, in which case you don't give a dollar and you just specify booking ID, and wherever you want to substitute it, there instead of doing a plus, you just give a comma and then you provide the ID. So let's copy the whole thing and let's change it in all the places. Control V and booking ID, Control V. Let's do a quick look. So at least the API call does not have any hard-coded information here, neither about the endpoint nor about any base URLs. So this looks okay. This looks okay. If we look in Auth API, Auth API has also base URL, which is picked from config, auth endpoint. So this is also good. Booking API also correct. Base spec also correct. So with this, I think we have got all the config information fetched. In fact, I think there's one more place. Let me see. Yeah, auth body. So if you remember, like I said, for now, for the auth body to work, we provided the secrets, actually the username password secrets within the test, but this is not how it should be done, right? So it should be passed as a part of config, and the way you can do it is exactly the same thing. So let's in fact copy the whole thing. Let's go to auth body. Let's provide this as a static field, and we need two fields, right? Username and password. So let's go back to all these secrets and let's change this usernames. So like in this example, I've given as admin login, admin password. So this is still a good thing to follow, because username and password would not be like just like any common username password. When you're doing any particular testing, you will have usernames for guest users, admin users, maintenance users, So let's keep this prefix, and then let's just change this as username secrets. And so with this, we can now go back and change the auth body to not have any hard-coded secrets, but we can say config.getString, and let me first copy paste the whole thing. And what we need to change is now only the uh, uh, name of these configurations, right? So auth body username is admin username, and admin password is, that is it, get instance admin password. And again, guys, like in this case, you can see I have like literally hard coded the configuration to always work with admin username, admin password. In the future, we will refactor this class so that not only these fields are not hard coded, but we get the right username and password depending on, if it is an admin user or if it is a guest user or whatever, right? Let's do a quick test, and if everything is working fine, then I think we have cleaned up all the secrets, away. So this test contains authentication token with update booking. So if this works fine, then all our secrets are all our secret and configurations are now moved to config files. So let's wait and watch. Okay, and if we go in the end, response was 200. Okay, the name was changed, right? So yeah, I think with this we have cleaned up all the configuration. What I can do is I can quickly create a branch. So let me say uh, uh, get branch, uh, get checkout branch, and I can say fix config, and let's commit all this code. Let's pull this down. We changed application config. This is correct. We changed auth API to use configuration, also correct. Auth body. At this moment, it only contains admin username password. In the future, we will create a factory which will pick the right configuration based on the scope of user. Base URL, booking API. Okay, all looks good. Secrets were changed. Okay, so updated, moved config and secrets to conf files, right? So I'm going to commit this, and I'm going to say git branch, and let's push the code and git push, create a pull request, and we're going to fix this separate config from code, right? So I'm going to convert this to an issue in REST Pro repository, number 11, and this is basically redesign rest assured test. Let's mark it as to do, and this is issue number 11. So I'm saying fixes issue number 11 and create a pull request. And now if I merge this pull request, there are 14 files here, and now all the config is now moved to config classes. And if I now just merge this PR config merge, we will see that, for example, this particular ticket would be automatically moved to done, right? So that's it for this video. In the next video, we will see what next to refactor. Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.